The human mind creates reality, not metaphorically, but literally. We are living in an era where the most fundamental questions about life are often brushed aside as if they were obvious. How should one live? How does one live a life of value? Is it living merely a purely biological verb, or is it a quiet, enduring ethical project day after day? Kazuo Inamori, a ceramic engineer who later became the founder of 2 global corporations, did not begin his life with any special advantages. No extraordinary intelligence, no noble birth, no powerful mentors. He had only one thing that he patiently honed, like a stone carver: his character. And it was that character, not strategy, not ambition, not luck, that built what appeared to be extraordinary results. But what is even more worth reflecting on is this: if life is a current, are we swimming according to our truest self, or are we merely temporary fragments shaped by societal expectations? If character is the vital energy behind achievement, then why do today's education and training systems almost completely neglect it? The book you are about to enter does not offer advice. It does not try to persuade. It simply presents, through real experiences, through unadorned reflection, through a voice that has walked through both light and shadow. And if you are quiet enough to listen, you may not be the same person when you emerge from these pages. Because perhaps the question is not how to live extraordinarily, but rather how to live so that one does not regret it before the end. As usual, before summarizing a book, we encourage listeners to buy and read the original so you can fully feel its content. Now, let's begin together. Part 1. There are moments in life when everything becomes a question. There are moments in life when you lift your head and see that everything around you has turned into questions. Why is life so off track? Why did I end up in this place? Why do all my efforts turn to dust? I have been there. A graduate in a time when no one was hiring, struck by serious illness, suffocating in the sense of failure. I once considered becoming a yakuza. Yes, I actually knocked on the door of an organized crime group. Because when the outside world rejects you, a part of you starts thinking, fine, then live in the underworld, at least their people still show gratitude and keep their word. Fortunately, I did not step through that door. But I stepped into something even more frightening, a tiny ceramics company on the verge of bankruptcy, no salary, no future. The place I thought was the absolute bottom of a human life. Yet it was from that rock bottom that I began to realize what I believe is the core law of human existence. What you hold in your mind, your life will become that. You may not believe me. It sounds like a motivational speech. But I am not talking about positivity. I am talking about physics. I am talking about the real power of thought, a force that can control work results, destiny, and even the flow of money into your company. If you think impossible, you will never see the way. If you think it must be possible, you begin to see the path. I once saw the mobile phone when everyone else thought it was science fiction. I saw the price of subscriptions, the number of users, the speed of adoption, all of it in my mind, many years before it became reality. Not because I was good at prediction, but because I thought about it so intensely that it began to appear like a real scene, full color, detailed outlines, even voices. When you think to that degree, you have crossed the boundary of mere ideas. You are entering the zone of reality creation. But not everyone can think to that level. And the reason is not lack of intelligence, it is lack of sufficient desire. There is a simple but life-changing formula I discovered. Life equals thinking times passion times ability. Multiplication, not addition. That means if your thinking carries a negative value, selfishness, pessimism, resentment, then no matter how talented you are or how passionate you feel, the result is still negative. I once considered becoming a mafia member, as I mentioned earlier, because I didn't get into the university I wanted, no one would hire me, illness made me feel hopeless. My mind at that time was drowning in resentment. I hated society, I hated myself. And exactly as expected, my life only brought me more of what I hated. It was only when I lay on my sickbed and read a book about consciousness that I realized, perhaps I was attracting bad things because I was always thinking about bad things. I began to change, nothing dramatic, just little by little. I chose to think good thoughts. Even though life hadn't improved yet, I was still criticized, salary delayed, working at a company on the brink of collapse, I told myself, this job may be small, but I will do it with all my ability. I buried myself in experiments. I even brought rice cookers into the lab. I thought about it even while sleeping. I dreamed of new compounds. And then I invented a new ceramic material. No one thought a nobody engineer like me could do what a top American company had done just a year earlier. Moreover, I did it using a completely different method. That was the first time I touched what I call the treasure house of universal intelligence. Later, I returned to that treasure house many times, by thinking to the utmost, by relentless hard work, by an attitude of sincerity and creative thirst. Some people think that to polish the soul, you must become a monk. I don't think so. I believe the best place for spiritual practice is the workplace. As long as you love the work you do and pour your whole self into it, you are cultivating yourself, you are forging your character. The drops of sweat in the pottery workshop, in meeting rooms, on factory floors, if they fall from a heart full of sincerity, they become the material that builds human character. You don't need to be smart. You just need to keep making effort without stopping. And most importantly, you must see clearly the thing you want to create. I once told my employees, our products must be so perfect that just looking at them cuts your hand. Meaning, flawless, no unnecessary details, sharp just by sight. You must see it in your mind, vividly, alive, before it appears in reality. And to do that, you must want it intensely, want it to the point of seeming crazy. What is the difference between a mere thought and a true belief? I think it is the degree of attachment your mind has to the image in your head. When you only think, you're still willing to change it if something new appears. But when you truly believe, it becomes the axis around which all your actions revolve, no matter what the outside world does. I once worked in a room the size of a bathroom, no modern machines, no safety goggles, no help. I tested a formula thousands of times, heating, cooling, measuring, correcting. I got chemical burns, inhaled toxic fumes, but I didn't stop, because in my mind, I already clearly saw a new product, an ultra-durable, heat-resistant, conductive ceramic. I could feel it in my hands even when I had nothing. Many years later, when leading a team of engineers, I often asked them a strange question. Can you already see the product you're inventing in your head? If they said no, I knew they hadn't really started. If they said yes and could describe every detail, I knew success was near. That visualization is not vague imagination. It is a trainable ability, like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And if you visualize every day with all your life force, you enter the flow of creation, where you no longer force ideas, ideas come to you. But there is one condition, your mind must be clear. I don't use that word in a religious sense, I use it technically. A polluted mind cannot receive subtle signals. If you are obsessed with fame, profit, jealousy, anger, you cannot connect to something greater than yourself. I have met very talented people who could not create anything extraordinary because they were talented only for themselves. They worked for ego, for personal satisfaction. But when you do something for others, for society, for future generations, you tune into a different frequency. And that's when I began to notice suspicious coincidences, ideas I thought of, people I needed to meet, doors I never expected, all appeared one after another. Not because I prayed, but because my mind had been refined by honest work and a benevolent intention. Part 2, A Mind as Wave, Ethics as Technique. We live in a material world, yet we are governed by the most invisible thing, intention and mind. No one teaches this in school, but real life is full of examples. You walk into a room where someone is angry, you feel it immediately, even if they say nothing. A selfish leader, employees sense it right away, even if no one points it out. A product made with heart, customers know, even if they can't explain why. Intention is a wave, and we are always broadcasting it. That's why I remind myself, do everything with full heart, full mind, and never deceive even by a fraction. Because even if others don't know, the universe knows, and you yourself know. Ethics may seem like something in books, but later I realized ethics is the deepest technique of living. It is the way to connect with an invisible source greater than yourself. It is the way to walk through life without fear. And that realization made me understand the only path to turn thought into reality is action, but action must be based on absolute faith and upright thinking. When I founded my first company, Kyocera, I had no money, no reputation, no customers, only a few young engineers. We worked together in a small workshop. But we had faith, we would live by making the best, most sincere products, and we would never compromise integrity for profit. Do you know what happened? Those products spread even without marketing. Customers recommended each other. One American company once asked, "What's different about your products?" I only answered, "We pour our whole heart into them." They laughed, but then they placed orders. Because they felt it, they weren't just buying a product, they were buying the heart packed inside it. Some people ask me, how do you know if your thinking is right or wrong? That is a very deep question. Because thoughts happen inside the head, and we humans always tend to believe our own thinking is correct. But I learned a very simple way to test it. If that thought makes your heart feel lighter, makes you feel in harmony with others, closer to nature and the universe, then it is a right thought. If the opposite, if it makes you feel isolated, anxious, comparative, jealous, then it is a deviated thought. Thinking doesn't need to be logically correct, but it must be correct in alignment with the great flow of life. It must connect you to something larger than yourself, to nature, to community, to the future. That is why I believe right thinking leads to right action creates right results. Many people think success comes from luck or clever strategy. I don't believe that. I have seen too many brilliant people collapse because they went wrong starting from their inner thoughts. And I have also seen many ordinary people create extraordinary things simply because they held a pure belief and never gave up. Many years later, even as chairman of a large corporation, I still keep the habit, think carefully, act immediately, and do it with my whole soul. I never dare take any thought lightly, because I know a selfish thought today will create skewed consequences tomorrow. I am not perfect. There were times I got angry, times I thought of revenge, times I felt despair. But precisely because of that, I understand clearly the value of a right thought. It is like a compass, not because you always walk straight, but because whenever you stray, you know the way back. In business, I never put profit targets first. I ask one question: what value are we creating for society? If there is no answer, I stop. If there is, I go all the way. Many people think that's unrealistic. But look at the longest living companies in the world, they all have a philosophy that transcends money. They have a core thought, a foundational value, and they protect it across generations. When you do something only to make money, you may make money, but eventually you lose. Because money flows with the times. But the value you live and die for, it remains. It attracts money, attracts talented people, attracts good fortune. That is how I understand turning thought into reality, not by daydreaming, but by thinking to the absolute limit, with upright thinking, great enough desire, and ceaseless action. Life doesn't need to be overly clever, doesn't need tricks, doesn't need excessive calculation of gain and loss. What you need is a vivid image in your mind of what you want to create, and a flame that never extinguishes. If you have that, no matter where you start, no matter the circumstances, no matter who you are, you can create something extraordinary. Start with thought, but don't stop at thought. Act. And act as if you are the only person on earth who can do it. People often think success comes from smart decisions. I think differently. If you rely only on intelligence, you go fast, but you can also fall very deep. What keeps you from slipping is not intellect, but principles. What is a principle? It is something that does not change. It is the foundation lying deep beneath all your behaviors, reactions, choices. In a world where everything moves, information, logic, everything changes, only principles keep you from being swept away. I have faced many situations that seem to have no way out. If I used ordinary logic, I would choose the easier, more profitable, more convenient path. But I always asked myself one question, considering the principle of being a human being: is this right? If no, I don't do it, even if I lose money, lose people, slow down. I don't do it. Many call that naive. But when you live long enough, you see, integrity is the most sustainably profitable asset. Because when you hold to principle, you keep others' trust, you keep your self-respect, you sleep well, you look in the mirror without shame. And gradually, the whole world begins to trust you. When I ran Kyocera, we didn't have complicated management systems or cumbersome procedures. The only thing I emphasized was think and act based on correct principles. And something strange happened. One by one, people in the organization began to self-adjust. No need for checks, they still chose kindness. No need to force, they stayed honest, not because they feared punishment, but because they didn't want to betray the trust we built together. In a society that grows more modern, people increasingly confuse cleverness with righteousness. You can bend the law, hide things, manipulate subtly so no one detects. But you know. You always know. And every time you deny principle, your inner trust erodes a little more. Once, a senior leader proposed a business plan that would bring in tens of billions of yen. The only issue, it bent the rules, not illegal, but not fully honorable. I asked him one question: would you dare tell your son the full details of this? He was silent. We're not doing it. Many years later, the competitor company that took that deal collapsed. Not just because of that one deal, but because it opened a chain of wrong choices. When you abandon principle once, the next times become easier, until finally you no longer know which path you're on. That is why I always remind myself, principle is my life's compass. If you lose direction, don't ask others, don't ask the internet, don't ask the market. Ask, considering the principle of being human, is this right? If no, stop. If yes, do it, even if others laugh. There are people who are very intelligent, excellent at analysis, quick like a computer. They predict markets accurately, react flexibly to changes, produce sharp strategies. But if you observe carefully, you'll see two types in that group. Some develop sustainably and earn lasting respect, others shine brightly for a moment and then fall very hard. I have always observed this and discovered a rule. The difference lies in whether they live based on principles or not. Principles are not rigid rules. They are not dogmatic moral statements. They are natural truths, like the laws of heaven and earth, like breathing, like the way the world operates when humans don't manipulate it. For example, treat others well, others will trust you. Do things with a clear heart, results tend to last. Help others unconditionally, people remember it forever, even if you ask for nothing in return. These things don't need proof, you feel they are true through intuition, through experience, through living. I once asked young employees, imagine you have to make a major business decision. No one is watching. Huge profit is promised, but one small detail makes it not entirely fair. Would you do it? Some answered, yes, if no one finds out. I don't blame them, but I never entrust important matters to them. Because I believe, whoever loses their sense of rightness is building a house on sand. As Kyocera grew stronger, one thing I always held firm. Never let the company sacrifice principles for profit, even during IPO, even under pressure from shareholders, even when media reported negatively. I still required all leaders to put principles before growth targets. And I discovered something. People who live by principles attract others who also live by principles, like clean water naturally flows to clean water, like a river gathers pure streams. Gradually, the company became a gathering of kind people, and that made the organization's strength truly superior. When I took over Japan Airlines, JAL, a bankrupt airline in restructuring, I didn't bring fancy strategies. I brought principles. I told all employees, do the right thing, one task at a time. Don't worry about financial numbers. Serve passengers as if they were your own family. Be upright with colleagues. At first they doubted. But then something strange happened. They began to feel proud of their work. They started fixing small things they used to ignore. They began caring for each other, not because of company policy, but because they wanted to do what was right. And in a short time, the airline returned to the market with soaring profits, not because of financial tricks, but because true inner strength had been awakened from people's hearts. Principles, in the end, are not something you study, they are something you live. You don't need to read hundreds of ethics books to become a righteous person. Just ask one question. If I put myself in the other person's position, would I accept this? If no, don't do it. If yes, do it with your whole heart. When you live by principles, you no longer need to worry constantly about results, because you know right results will come, even if not immediately. That is a quiet form of faith I have accumulated over many years of working, failing, rising, observing life, and verifying everything I believe. You don't need to race against the world. You just need to walk your own correct path, and principles are that path. Many people think living by principles is slow. But what I see is, people who live rightly often have more sustainable speed than anyone else, because they are not distracted, not caught in trivial things, not forced to turn back every time they make a mistake caused by themselves. They make fewer wrong turns, and therefore save energy to go farther. In one meeting with the management team, I once said, "Stop immediately if this makes your conscience uneasy, no matter how big the promised profit." Some didn't understand. They asked, "Then how long will it take for the company to grow?" I answered, "The right question is not how long, but whether that growth makes us proud. Because if it doesn't make you proud, sooner or later you will pay the price for it." Many years ago, a rival company copied Kyocera's technology, launched products faster and cheaper. The media praised them as innovative, investors poured money in. I stayed silent. I told my team, we just keep making products with all our dignity. Users will recognize it. 3 years later, that company was sued for contract violations, lost trust, stock plummeted. Meanwhile, we did nothing different, just kept our principles, and continued developing sustainably. Holding to principles is not idealism, it is a life strategy. As a founder, an executive, a leader, you will have the right to choose easier, faster, sometimes more cunning paths. But it is precisely in those moments that your true nature reveals itself. And if you want to build something that can endure, you must build it with bricks of integrity. Otherwise, no matter how tall the building, it will shake as soon as the wind blows. People often say, "Don't be too rigid." I agree, you shouldn't live like a moral machine. But you also cannot live like grass bending in the wind. What is needed is flexibility within the framework of principles, like a tree trunk that is supple yet has deep roots. Whenever I feel conflicted, I don't ask subordinates, don't ask friends, don't ask experts. I ask, if I were an ordinary person with a good heart, what would I do in this situation? And the answer always comes, simple, clear, and powerful. That is why I wrote this chapter, not to preach morality, but to share that principles are not just right, they are beneficial in the long run. The more you live by principles, the less you need to fear mistakes. Because even when you err, you will be forgiven, by others and by yourself, since your mistake came not from malice, but from the effort to live rightly. Part 3, Personality is the true foundation. One of the truths I realized after decades of working is this: talent does not determine the future, personality does. At first I didn't believe it, just like most people. I thought the intelligent, the sharp-minded, the strategic ones would go farther, and indeed they do go very fast. They amaze others, solve problems in an instant, produce ideas that stun everyone. But then I saw them stumble. And when they fall, nothing catches them because they never built a strong enough character to lift them back up. I have seen brilliant people defeated by their own ego. They cannot admit mistakes. They blame others. They refuse to step back even one step. They look down on colleagues. And when storms come, they stand alone. Meanwhile, I have seen slower, less flashy people, not particularly outstanding, yet always patient, honest, hard-working, respectful of others. They rise step by step, like water slowly seeping deep into the soil. Eventually they become pillars, not just because they get things done, but because everyone wants to walk with them. That is when I understood personality is what supports an entire career. I'm not saying this as moral preaching. I say it from real experience. Kyocera was not built by the most talented people. In fact, many highly capable individuals left the company because they couldn't stand the overly real environment. They wanted politics, internal competition, doing little but getting a lot. But Kyocera is not a place for that kind of person. We chose people who live by self-respect, not necessarily outstanding, but trustworthy. Not necessarily eloquent, but real. Not necessarily leaders, but people others want to follow. And I saw that it is precisely these people who create the true strength of an organization. But personality is not something you are born with. It is something forged day by day, like rough stone needing polishing, like a blade needing tempering. And the best forge for personality is the work you do every single day. You don't need to go to a mountain to meditate. You just need to face yourself in every small task. Today, did I slack off? Did I lie to anyone? Did I envy, gossip, take credit? Did I truly listen to others? If you answer those questions honestly, you are forging your character. And when character is forged deeply enough, it becomes a field around you. Others feel it. They trust you. They entrust you with work. They want to walk alongside you, not because you are exceptional, but because you make them feel safe. In my life, there are many people whose names or faces I don't remember, but one thing I remember clearly, they were respectable people. And that is nobler than any fame. I never studied management at university. I never read Western philosophy books or leadership manuals. Everything I learned came from collisions in work and from observing human souls when facing profit, failure, hurt, glory. And what I discovered is, character does not show in success, it shows in difficulty. A person can speak well, promise beautifully, behave politely when everything is smooth. But watch them when they are misunderstood, when their interests are violated, when no one stands on their side. That is when true character appears. The patient one or the resentful one? The responsible one or the escaper? The one who reflects on self or the one who points fingers? That is why I always pay attention to how employees behave under pressure, not to judge them, but to know where they stand on the inner journey. Because I believe character can be developed. No one is born kind, patient, generous. We only become so through days of stumbling, mistakes, and daring to face ourselves. When recruiting for Kyocera, I didn't emphasize degrees or achievements. I observed attitude. I listened to how they spoke about others. I looked into their eyes when they talked about their past. I wanted to know, does this person know how to reflect on themselves? Do they want to live decently? Are they willing to admit fault? Because if they have those things, I believe they will grow, go far, become someone others want to accompany, not just work with. Once, a new employee made a serious mistake that caused a major client to cancel a contract, damage worth hundreds of millions of yen. He came to me trembling, bowed deeply, apologized. I asked, since it happened, how many times have you thought about it? He said, more than 100 times. Every time my heart aches. I didn't scold him. I didn't fire him. I said, a person who feels pain when doing wrong will not repeat it. Many years later, he became a department head, not because he was smart, but because he had a soul capable of growing. In life, people often try to hide their weak, dark parts. But I believe, only when you dare look at your darkness do you truly begin to change. We all have selfishness, laziness, desire, jealousy. That is not bad. It is bad only when you refuse to recognize it, when you pretend you are always right, always good, always noble. Then you can never improve. I learned this from my own failures. When young, I was quick to anger, judgmental, imposing on others. Each time, I saw the hurt not only to others but to myself. I went home tormented, couldn't sleep. One day, I started writing down every wrong behavior, not to blame myself, but to avoid repeating it. I called it my personality journal. By recording even small mistakes, I clearly saw who I was, and step by step, I corrected. No one becomes kind just by hearing advice. Only when you touch the shame inside and still choose to face it do you begin to polish your soul. Later, when Kazuo grew larger, when I stood before thousands of employees, when people called me chairman, founder, successful man, I still kept thinking about two words: personality. Because I know clearly, just one moment of letting it slip, and everything can collapse. I have witnessed many large companies crumble, not because of the market, not because of lack of ability, but because leaders failed to hold their dignity. One lie, one dishonest decision, one burst of uncontrolled anger, and trust cracks, the organization shatters. If you ask me what is the most precious asset in a human life, I answer without hesitation: personality. No one can take it from you unless you yourself throw it away. And when you have personality, everything else comes naturally: money, reputation, relationships, trust, as natural results, without chasing. But to keep personality, you must train it every day. I call it polishing the soul, not to shine for others to see, but so that you yourself can see clearly. Every morning when I wake up, I ask myself, can I live more beautifully today than yesterday? Can I be humbler, more understanding, less hot-tempered? Not to be praised, but to be worthy of myself. I also train my employees in this way. We don't just talk about product technology, market share, or numbers. We talk about how to be a human being, about living decently in the work environment, about maintaining integrity even when no one is supervising. Once, a young engineer came to ask me, "Chairman, I'm not as talented as others. Is it possible that I can never succeed?" I looked at him and said, "If you work with a clear heart, never stop learning, live kindly, and never give up, then even if no one calls you successful, you are still a great human being." There are many ways to measure a human life: fame, wealth, achievements. But there is one measure I believe is the deepest: the solidity of the soul. When facing pain, can you still keep love in your heart? When standing at the peak, can you remain humble? When misunderstood, do you have enough generosity not to retaliate? These are the questions I still carry with me every day, even now that my hair has turned grey. And I believe, if you answer them through action, not words, you have become stronger than anyone. See your work as a mirror reflecting your character. Every mistake is an opportunity to correct yourself. Every conflict is a chance to understand others. Every workday is a lesson in living. You don't need to search far for an environment to develop yourself. It is right here, in the very tasks you are doing now. And if you live with your whole being, sincerely, uprightly, persistently, then you don't need to worry about where you're going or where you'll end up. Because your own character will guide the way. And that is something that never disappears, even when everything else is gone. Part for living for others is the wisest and most sustainable path. There is something strange in life: when you live for others, you end up receiving more for yourself. At first glance, that seems paradoxical. In a competitive world, everyone protects their own share, fights for what they need. Whoever thinks too much about others is often seen as weak. But I have lived through nearly an entire life, and the deepest lesson I've learned is this: altruism is not sacrifice, it is the wisest and most sustainable way of living. When I was young, I was selfish. I often compared myself to others, thought no one understood me, always saw myself as the victim. Those thoughts made me suffer, working felt exhausting, my emotions were constantly bitter, my heart always felt lacking. Then one day I read a line in an old book: "Live for others." I didn't understand it right away, but I tried. I tried small things. Instead of arguing to prove I was right, I stayed silent and listened. Instead of taking the best part for myself, I gave it to my colleagues. Instead of thinking only of my own benefit, I considered how others would be affected. What happened? I felt lighter. I slept better. And strangely, others started caring about me, helping me, trusting me. I didn't change the world, but I changed how I lived, and the world around me changed in response. When I founded Kazuo, I set an unspoken rule. Every major decision must consider the benefit of others. Will customers gain from this? Will employees be disadvantaged? Will society receive anything? We didn't chase profit at all costs. We wanted products to deliver real value, no flashy advertising, no overpromising, no forcing employees to sacrifice for beautiful numbers. Instead, we created an environment where everyone was respected, everyone had a voice. And the strange thing is, when you live with humanity, business actually flows more smoothly. Loyal customers, dedicated employees, trustworthy partners, none of these can be bought with money, they can only be given through the heart. Living altruistically does not mean abandoning yourself. On the contrary, it is the strongest way to develop yourself. Because you learn to control your ego, to be patient, to listen, to put yourself in others' shoes. Those qualities, no school teaches them. Only life does, if you open your heart. I once asked a young leader, "Do you truly care for your employees?" He said, "I want them to perform well so the company hits its targets." I replied, "That's not care, that's control. Care is when you want them to be happy, even if it doesn't help your performance numbers." True altruism begins there, from a selfless gaze, from unconditional concern. And when you live that way long enough, you realize you lose nothing. You only expand yourself. Some ask, but if I live altruistically while others don't, won't I be taken advantage of? A very real question, and I don't deny it. There will be times you are exploited, times you give without return, times others misunderstand your heart. But I also discovered, when you live with a good heart for a long time, you no longer need others to repay you. Because the very act of living that way already brings you peace. And that inner peace is the greatest asset a person can possess. In the early years of building the company, we faced many difficulties, few orders, lack of capital, unstable staff. Once, a major partner delayed payment for a long time, pushing us to the brink of bankruptcy. Many people in the company were furious, they wanted to sue, wanted justice. I stayed quiet. I arranged a meeting with their representative. I didn't accuse or blame. I only said, "We are in great difficulty, but I understand your side is also under pressure. If possible, I hope you will reconsider, not because of the contract, but because of the people involved." He was silent for a very long time, then said, "I've never heard anyone speak like that in business." 3 days later, they paid the full amount. And in the years that followed, they became our most loyal partner. If I had chosen confrontation, it might not have been wrong, but I chose dialogue with compassion. Not because I was weak, but because I believe only the human heart can move another human heart. That is what true altruism can do, win without needing to win, gain something greater. Another time, a veteran employee was found to have made a major error in warehouse management, damage worth hundreds of millions of yen. The leadership team suggested firing him. I asked to meet him privately. As soon as he entered, he knelt down and cried like a child. He said he hadn't slept for a whole week. I asked, if given another chance, how would you live? He choked, "I will dedicate the rest of my life to making up for it." I kept him. And just as he promised, 10 years later, he became one of the most respected managers. If you live only by rules, you can maintain order. But if you live by altruism, you nurture human hearts. And when hearts are nurtured, people will give their all, for you, for the company, for things greater than salary or bonuses. I'm not saying every mistake should be forgiven. Some errors require clear, firm handling. But if you look deeper, you'll see that even the wrongdoer carries pain inside. And if you understand that pain, the way you act will change. Living altruistically doesn't mean being naive. It requires wisdom. It requires the courage not to react immediately but to observe, not to judge but to understand. That's why truly altruistic people are not weak, they are the strongest. Because they are strong enough not to need to prove anything, not to retaliate, not to claim victory. Living altruistically doesn't mean you must abandon yourself or endure everything. Many misunderstand altruism as endless tolerance, as letting others hurt you. That's not it. True altruism is not doing what others want, it is putting yourself in their position to understand them, then making the right choice. Sometimes forgive, sometimes speak clearly, sometimes be firm. But whatever you choose, the root remains love. In company life, I had to discipline employees many times. But each time, I asked myself, am I doing this to save them, or just to satisfy my anger? If the latter, I don't do it. If the former, I do it, but with a gentle tone, in a way that helps them understand rather than hurt them. I remember one employee who was suspended for falsifying reports. He was very capable. When he heard about the suspension, he burst into tears, not because of lost income, but because he felt he had damaged everyone's trust. I wrote him a personal handwritten letter. If you still want to start over, the door remains open. But you must begin again from the inside. Many years later, he returned, no longer arrogant, but someone who listens, slows down, understands others more deeply. He didn't just regain his old position, he became a mentor to newcomers, not through skill, but through the experience of someone who once fell. Altruism is like that, it doesn't erase mistakes, it helps people walk through them with a stronger heart. In today's world, where everyone is busy, everyone wants to outdo others, everyone protects their own peace, altruism is like a small stream. It makes no noise, but it seeps into people's hearts. And precisely because it is rare, it becomes precious. Some ask me, can people live well without being altruistic? I answer, yes, but not deeply, and not for long. Because someone who lives only for themselves will always feel uneasy. They know that if they stumble even once, no one will stand by them. Meanwhile, those who live for others, even when they fall, still have hands reaching out to lift them. And deep down, that is what all of us truly want, to live among people who don't abandon each other. Altruism creates relationships no contract can create. It turns work from a burden into a place that nourishes the soul. It turns a company from a place to earn a living into a place to live a meaningful life. That is why I choose to live this way, not for morality, not for religion, but because I have seen with my own eyes, altruism is the path that makes a human being whole. And I believe anyone can live this way, if they dare to place others inside their heart, even just a little, every day. Transition to the final major part, aging, seeing life differently, harmony with the universe's flow. When you reach a certain age, you begin to look at life with different eyes. No longer seeing everything as a battlefield to win a share. No longer trying to control everything. No longer measuring life only by career or success. I began to feel that something larger is operating everything, an invisible order, a will of the universe. I'm not talking about religion, nor blind faith. I'm talking about something you can feel if you live long enough and deeply enough. Everything that happens has a reason. If you live kindly, uprightly, persistently, even if you take detours, you will still arrive at the right place. I call it the flow of the universe. And I learned how to live in harmony with it. Final major part, harmony with the flow of the universe. When I was young, I was always impatient, I wanted everything fast. Results, success, achievements. I thought, if I try hard enough, I can change everything. But then I realized there are times when you do everything right, yet things still don't go as planned. You behave well, still misunderstood. You give your all, still fail. At first I felt it was unfair. Then I observed. Then I thought deeply. Then I became still. I came to understand, the universe has its own schedule. What you need to do is live rightly. The results, when they come, how they come, that belongs to heaven and earth. From that point, I changed the way I live. I no longer try to force things to happen the way I want. I just do my best within my ability and leave the rest to the flow. And strangely, things started arriving more gently. I once wanted to expand Kyocera rapidly, aggressive growth plans, acquisitions, market domination. But after one tense meeting, I asked myself, am I following the flow, or fighting against it? I looked back and saw I was forcing the company to chase numbers, neglecting the people. I stopped. I told the leadership, we will grow slower, but deeper. And the result? 3 years later, the company was developing more sustainably than ever, fewer risks, fewer fractures, fewer conflicts. Because everyone moved in the same rhythm. I began to trust the natural rhythm of things. A tree doesn't grow in a day. A child doesn't mature overnight. A heart doesn't become solid in a month. Everything needs time, needs settling, needs understanding. And when you live according to that rhythm, life becomes much gentler. When I speak of living in harmony with the flow of the universe, many misunderstand it as passivity or giving up. But no, absolutely not. Living in accordance with the flow does not mean sitting still and waiting. It means actively living well, while not clinging to outcomes. That is a very difficult art of living. Because we are taught to strive, to control, to grasp everything. But the older I get, the more I see, the most beautiful things in my life did not come from calculation, but from moments when I lived fully and let things arrive naturally. Imagine you are rowing a boat. If you row against the current, you exhaust yourself. If you let go completely, you drift aimlessly. But if you understand the current, choose the right direction, use just enough strength, you go very far without burning out. Life is the same. You cannot control everything, but you can adjust yourself to go in the right direction. You can live truthfully, act rightly, think kindly, and then keep moving forward. No tension, no forcing, no rushing. Many times in life, the biggest opportunities did not come from intense preparation, but from unexpected connections. Once I was invited to speak to a group of young entrepreneurs. I was going to decline because of a busy schedule, but for some reason I accepted. In that talk, there was one person sitting quietly at the back. Many months later, he became the bridge connecting me to a charitable organization, opening up a series of community support activities I had never imagined. If I had refused that day, perhaps I would never have met him and never entered such a humanitarian path. From that, I learned, live with an open heart. Because you never know what is coming. The universe has plans for you that even you don't know, but you can only meet them when you are steady enough, kind enough, and patient enough to wait. I started waking up earlier, eating more slowly, speaking less. I observe more, listen more carefully. I am no longer driven by schedules, I follow the rhythm of life. I see flowers blooming in the yard. I see elderly people smiling on the bus. I see morning light slipping through the door crack. Those small things seem trivial, but they soothe my soul more than any success. And when the mind becomes gentle, you begin to live as part of the flow. You no longer feel separate. You no longer need to grab or fight. You simply live. And that makes you deeper. You won't panic when winter comes, because you understand everything has cycles. You will pass through even the coldest days of life with calm. I have been betrayed, misunderstood, made mistakes, thought I couldn't stand up again. But I never despaired, because I knew winter would pass. All you need is to keep a small flame inside to warm yourself. And that flame is the quiet faith that the universe never abandons anyone who lives kindly. There are nights I wake up in the middle of a dream and feel something very clear. I am just a tiny being in this infinite realm. Yet at the same time, I am an indispensable part of the whole. And that realization brings me peace. I began looking at others with gentler eyes. I no longer get angry easily, no longer want to win or lose, no longer think I am better than anyone. I just want to live each day fully awake, diligently, lovingly. Because I know, every small action of mine, if it flows with that current, will have invisible impacts far beyond what I can measure. Like throwing a pebble into a lake, the ripples spread very far. Living rightly is like that. You may not see results immediately, but what you do, think, and choose today becomes part of a larger flow. And that flow will gradually carry you to where you need to be. You don't need to become extraordinary by defeating others. You only need to live true to the best, most beautiful part of yourself. And if you do that every day, every step, every small thing, then you have already lived an extraordinary life. Closing, reflection by the narrator. Thank you for walking with me to the very last page of this book. A journey without noise, without drama, but powerful enough to awaken in the heart a quiet concern. How can one live without waste? We have just passed through the folds of Inamori's thoughts, a man who started from zero. No rebellion, no privileges, no innate genius, but awake enough not to live as others dictate, and brave enough to live according to what he believes is right. This book does not give you a success formula. It does not teach how to get rich. It does not promise to change your life in 7 days. It only poses one very difficult, yet very straightforward, thing. If you want to live differently, start from character. Not with slogans, but with how you treat colleagues when no one is watching. How you think about others when you are hurt. How you choose the kind path when shortcuts are always available. If anything remains with you after listening, I hope it is not admiration for the author, but a quiet question directed at yourself. What am I living by? And if you don't yet have an answer, that's okay. In fact, the moment a person begins to ask the meaning, they have already started walking. If you find this book valuable, please leave a review. Not so I know you listened, but so others can pause in this noisy world and read something worth reading. And if there is any book, any work, that once made you sit quietly for a long time after closing it, please suggest it to me. Because sometimes it is you or not me who is guiding the next journeys. See you again in another book.